In the latest in the trial of Derek Chauvin, we have the testimony of Dr. Martin Tobin, a physician in pulmonary critical care and an expert in respiratory physiology. Obviously, when it comes to George Floyd, that sort of expertise is incredibly important. And so we want to find out from an expert like this, what exactly happened, what led to Floyd's death. I want to show you a bit of that testimony, and then we'll give you a bit of a summary of what happened this morning. But first, here is Dr. Martin Tobin.
Have you formed an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to what the cause is or was for the low level of oxygen in Mr. Floyd?
Yes, I have.
Would you tell us what that is?
The cause of the low level of oxygen was shallow breathing. Small breaths, small tidal volumes, shallow breaths that weren't able to carry the air through his lungs down to the essential areas of the lungs that get oxygen into the blood and get rid of the carbon dioxide. That's the alveoli at the bottom of the lung.
Now look, it's great to have the detail, to have an expert testifying about this, and in even greater detail, which we'll turn to in a second. But of course, it also, I don't know, Rashad, like stings to have to hear experts tell us what we already know and have known for a year, hoping that maybe if we have a doctor who looks like that, telling us very specific granular details about it, then maybe more people will accept that, yes, kneeling on someone's neck for 9 minutes possibly can kill them. So hopefully it works, but what did you think about the testimony so far?
Great irony, especially with that expert and all of the experts, even the police supervisors, John, that have testified and said, okay, it's not company policy what he did, regardless of what anyone may say. It is not something that we teach at the academy. And what you saw on tape, what you saw recorded is actually what happened. It was a murder. This medical expert had to literally spell out in detail what led to the death of something. We all saw it. It shouldn't be this hard, but here's why it's this hard, John. And this is the challenge. This is the enigma of the criminal justice system. Is this hard because cops enjoy a level of immunity in their own profession? They're not held to a higher standard of accountability. They're held to a lower standard of accountability because they have what's called a subjective standard rather than an objective standard. So if a cop says in his own mind, he was in fear for his life, regardless of a reasonable person's estimation of that. If he says subjectively, I felt that I was in danger of my life, courts have typically allowed that cop to get away with murder. You and I don't have that. Everyone watching us, they wouldn't have that. Everybody else, they only enjoy what's called an objective standard if they kill someone. That means if a reasonable person would have done the same thing in that situation, but cops have this immunity. And that, John, is different than any other profession. Medical doctors are held to a higher standard of care. Psychiatrists are held to a higher standard of care. Educators, professors are held to a higher standard of care. And the industry that's not held to a higher standard of care, but a lower standard of care are police officers, and that's the problem.
Yeah, and even though, like reasonably, if we're saying, hey, what is your subjective evaluation of how much threat to your life there was? We need to understand that they are answering that question with a subjective fear of going to prison. So maybe they'll lie, maybe they'll exaggerate, or maybe they're trained to be terrified constantly of everything they see, everything that moves, particularly from certain demographic groups. So yeah, that is 100% true. Now I want to give you a little bit more information from Dr. Martin Tobin. He testified that the main forces that led to Floyd's fatal shallow breaths, and this is a response to him watching the video of it. He said Floyd lying prone, Floyd being handcuffed, Floyd having a knee on his neck, and Floyd having a knee on his back and side. While showing a computer rendering of the arrest of the court, Tobin explained that the handcuffs combined with Floyd's placement on the ground created something of a vice on Floyd's left side, making it virtually impossible for him to get air into the left side of his chest. Tobin noted that Floyd was pushing on the pavement and the squad car with his fingers and knuckles, trying to lift his chest in order to breathe. To most people, this doesn't look terribly significant, but to a physiologist, this is extraordinarily significant, he says, because this tells you he has used up his resources and he is now literally trying to breathe with his fingers and knuckles. And that is just devastating to hear. And to think that possibly all that needed to be done for him to still be alive is for Chauvin to have gotten off of him. That's it. To have been a reasonable human, just like the lowest possible expectation of not wanting to jeopardize a person's life. If he had complied with that, based on what we're seeing here, based on what the experts are saying, he would be alive.
Yeah, and obviously this cop, Derek Chauvin, and the other cops, they are emotionally bankrupt. They are morally corrupt. And that's why it's important for police agencies to engage in the practice of psychological evaluation every 6 months. Right now, for the vast majority, over 98% of police agencies in America, you only get a psychological evaluation one time in your entire career, unless there's a dispute, unless there's a criminal allegation or something else happens later in your career. They should be routine, John, because we know the same cop that gets hired may not be the same cop mentally a year later or 2 years later. They need to be constantly evaluated.
Yeah, especially when I don't think it's unreasonable to say that the process of training they go through would result in some strange ways of thinking about what their job and obligation are, way of thinking about the people that they're gonna be around. A person who is reasonably sane pre-training might have shades of something completely subversive and dangerous afterward. It should totally be taken into account. Now, really fast, I just wanted to get your response to, it's a related topic, but qualified immunity. We had New York removing it. I just saw today, I believe New Mexico getting rid of it. These are, entire state doing it. That seems pretty significant. What do you think about that? Do you think it's gonna spread?
Yeah, it's definitely going to spread. Big ups to New York for being the first state to literally just get rid of it totally. Georgia has something very similar that was part of a ballot initiative where voters got to vote. Now remember, Georgia is still considered to be a Republican state, even though Democrats now represent them in the US Senate. It still has a Republican governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, etc., labor commissioner, the whole nine, right? Legislature. But the voters got an opportunity to vote on this, and they said, let's get rid of qualified immunity. But the bill doesn't go far enough. It just basically says that a Superior Court judge can at will set aside this immunity for government workers, including police officers. So it's not a blanket like New York, but it chips away at this ridiculous immunity clause that has been associated and affiliated with people in policing.
Yeah, that's such a weird version. It's like, okay, you don't have qualified immunity except if the judge thinks that you qualify for this immunity.
Yep.
It's weird. Anyway, I'm not an expert, obviously. I'm not a lawyer. That's why we bring people like you on to give us your expertise as you continue to learn and train.
For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.